So this panel, another exciting one. Water is also a very important topic next to energy. We consume a heck of a lot of energy, but there's only so much water to go around. So I think this is going to be another exciting panel. I know I enjoyed getting to meet both Tim and Saya on the our pre-call and getting to learn a little bit more about what we're doing here in either Chicago or in Hobart. And so I'm going to turn it over to them. I don't need to introduce myself again, but I'm also joined by Rebecca Fiorentino from the Avicado team, who actually has a history working in the water sector. So I'm going to tee it up to you to introduce yourself first, and then we'll work our way back this way. How's that sound?
Sounds good. My name's Rebecca Fiorentino, and like Nick said, I'm currently with Avicado, but previously to that, I was with the Chicago Water Department for 5 years, and I had the pleasure of managing their infrastructure or their project management information system. So I just have a really unique perspective of how their challenges are in technology. So excited to help with the panel.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Saya Mishauri, and I'm the Chief Water Engineer for the Department of Water Management for the City of Chicago. As you may know, we are getting to the end of this marathon. The energy is dipping, but I promise that this subject worth your attention, and you may even enjoy it. Whenever it's just getting to the water subject, we were thinking of out of sight, out of mind concept. Your water is there when you're waking up in the morning. Your coffee is your coffee machine. You can take a shower. You can use the bathroom, and you don't even think about it until you get to the issue. Now I want to just emphasize that here Midwest boasts some of the most extensive water infrastructure networks, and Chicago has the iconic role with having the tremendous amount of water infrastructure here. From we have the first rank treatment plants in the nation, with having 1.2 billion gallon treatment facility plant here in Chicago. We have ranked first and ranked sixth one right here in Chicago. We do have a massive infrastructures, including the deep tunnels that drawing the water from our intake cribs all the way to the treatment plants. From treatment plants, all processed water is just going through the gravity to our pumping stations, and from the pumping stations, we are running 4,400 miles of the water mains, grid mains, services to the end users. And the sewer mains are just the other story. I don't want to get into that subject later. So what we are doing in the water management, I want to bring and emphasize how massive these infrastructures are and how much work needs to be implemented to take care of these infrastructures. I don't want to take the time. I'll leave it to you to go over it.
No. I want to give kudos for the people who lasted this long. So shout out to you guys. My name is Tim Kingsland. I'm the coordinator for the City of Hobart Stormwater and Sanitary District. I deal more with on the stormwater side. Our water utility is a separate entity, but I do have a water license from the state of Illinois, so I do have some history back there. We're a small town, city. 30,000. I call it the crossroads of America, because basically you can go take I-80, go east-west, or you could take I-65, go north-south. So basically you can travel anywhere from the city of Hobart. I'm a firm believer in water quality. That's one of my functions of my job, is to ensure that what you drink is quality, because the last thing you want to do is turn on the faucet and see brown rust or mineral tasting water. So it's very important that the water that goes into the system is clean, and I'm a firm believer in that. We've done a number of projects throughout the city to ensure water quality. How many of you know what when I say green infrastructure? A couple of you, a few of you. We're a firm believer in green infrastructure. Over the last 7 years, we've put over $1 million worth of rain gardens, bioswales, native plantings, various other things to ensure that the water that runs off is clean as much as possible, because where we eventually discharge into, I shouldn't say dump, discharge, is into Lake Michigan, which is your source of water and the source of water for Northwest Indiana. And so it's very critical before that water gets to that lake as clean as possible. So the treatment cost hopefully is more minimal.
I think what's really interesting too is that Saya, you kicked it off with thinking about the water that comes out of our taps and how we typically consume water. But then Tim, you really kind of dialed it back into there's a lot more to even how we capture the water and then return it to the system. And there's something really, I think, interesting about that ecosystem. And I'm curious just to expand a little bit more on it in terms of what does it mean to understand our water in the varying states, from either the distribution side, getting it to people, or the kind of reclamation and treatment side of treating it and getting it back into the system.
A lot of people turn the faucet on and think, well, clean water. They don't realize the amount of work behind the scenes to get that water cleaned. It depends on the size of the city. It depends on the treatment options, on what you are required to clean the water with. The first town I worked for in Illinois was a Class C, so we were chlorine and fluoride, and that's all we had to worry about. Chicago, I think you're probably a Class A or B. Yeah. So because there's a lot more processes involved in cleaning of water, and I couldn't even imagine what they would have to go through. But it's not there's a lot of work behind there, a lot of unsung heroes to ensure that that water that when you turn in, shower with, whatever you may do with it, as clean as possible. On my side of the fence, more on the stormwater side, a lot of people don't realize stormwater is your number one carrier of pollutants. That's by the EPA, not by me. And I was a little surprised when I got into what they call the stormwater management of it, and that stormwater is not a pollutant itself, but is the largest carrier of hydrocarbons, TSS, total suspended solids, many other things. And so, when I started in that line of work, I realized that there's a lot of stuff that we could do as individuals to ensure that water stays clean, by making sure that a lot of people don't realize when you fertilize your yards, that runoff goes, where does that runoff go into? Right into the storm drains. Where does the storm drains go to? Right into the waters of the U.S. And, it's a non-ending cycle. So there's a lot of things we can do to ensure that the water is clean by, just best management practices that we can do at home, install, native plants. You know what the difference between turf grass and native plants? It's the root structure. Usually native plants, root structures some plants can go up to 8 feet in the ground. They have a more solid base and they can pull more pollutants out of the ground. But there's a lot of things we can do, individually, and from my side, let's try to keep that water that goes into the waters of the U.S. as clean as possible.
Yeah, to add what my colleague and friend just mentioned about that, now we have we know what we are dealing with. We're dealing with the massive infrastructures. And now what are the weak links, or what are the weak points? I would just call it that way. What is the pressures on the system? I would just call it the most important pressure on the system is the aging of these infrastructures. We do have other multiple factors that dig in, like the climate change, like the growth of the population. These are all other factors in adjacent to all other, like the limitations that we may have. We have to be compatible with the new regulatory requirements. We have to be compatible with the procurement regulations. We have to be compatible with the finance, like as my friend just mentioned about those SRF funding. This is one of the examples of this. We have so many limitations out there, and what we need to find out is what are the challenges out there? What are the challenges that are critical points in our water infrastructures? I would just call it number 1, 2, 3 is the aging. We are really dealing with the aging of these infrastructures. These are the massive infrastructures but built more than 100 years ago or even more. Our pumping stations have the life of 150 years ago. Those equipments are there. We need to just make a plan ahead of time while we find out our assets. What are our critical points or critical assets? First of all, we have to identify this. To find out, classify the asset management protocol is playing a very important role in that. While you find out what is your critical or weak point of the failure of your system, then you can just find out what mechanism can help to improve and what strategies can help to just promote and rehabilitate that. I think our mission is not only just keep it for ourselves, but we have to just promote it and make it reliable for next generations as well. I would just add more to it. Just
keep
time to speak.
Nah, keep going if you got it. But I think what's really fascinating and kind of why I teed up that question is it really helps us understand a little bit more of how comprehensive and complex water infrastructure can be. And many times when we think about infrastructure, we can be thinking about railroads and roads and bridges and things that we can see. And there's a lot of aspects of the water infrastructure that is kind of just part of the earth. And I wonder if you can share a little bit more, I guess, as we work toward more modern solutions and measuring that asset and that infrastructure, what does it look like to look at the water infrastructure and capture that information?
That's a good question. Funding is always, especially for a smaller city, funding is always critical. We, usually a smaller city is understaffed. We don't have the manpower to address everything or the funding to address everything. It's a challenge. How I've been able to survive and to get some things done around the city is grants. There's been a lot of grants out there that I've been able to secure that has helped. Trying to ensure how we manage stormwater management. We implemented a asset management program. How many are from local cities around here? You guys have to do an asset management plan now? Yep. To get an SRF loan in today's world, hopefully most of you know what an SRF, State Revolving Fund, you have to, at least in the state of Indiana, you have to have an asset management program. And to have an AMP, basically when you're a smaller city, it's very challenging because that's where you got to really start figuring out where all the money's going to. What's the cost? How are we going to attract the man hours? And when you got a workforce who tends to be on an older age level, they tend to have the attitude, if it ain't broke, why fix it? And now you're trying to introduce software that a lot of them, why am I doing this? Why do I have to keep track of my man hours? Why do I get, keep the cost, turn in all the invoices and all that? Well, the only way we can manage our resources is to have documentation and the data to analyze after the fact that, the next project, as my friend here said, how are you going to know when to replace a pump? Or, on our side, on the sanitary side, we have a regional lift station that's already, we put in close to $40 million this year just because of the age of the pumps. And the force main that, we have a 4-mile force main that we had to put a parallel force main in just to ensure that we would be able to pump our raw sewage out. So having an AMP is very critical. Trying to educate your workforce to have them understand why you're doing this, because it's got to come from bottom up when you're trying to introduce these new processes. And it's going to be a big change, especially for the smaller cities. I can't really relate to Chicago because they're, 3 million, 4 million, whatever.
More than 5 million.
5 million, we're 30,000 people, so their priorities are going to be a little bit different than ours. But from a small city perspective, technology is making a difference. Are we there yet? No. Will we be there in a couple years? That's up for Jill and her generation to figure that one out. But I don't know. It's going to be a challenge.
Yeah, to add to what you mentioned, from the capital standpoint and our infrastructures, first of all, we were thinking of having the capital improvement programs. This program will gonna be a short-term program, which gonna be covered like the 5-year CIP, and you're gonna have like a 10-year program based on the new regulatory requirements. And like the challenges that I mentioned like earlier, first of all, we developed those like the CIP programs to make sure that we are seeing what needs to be done from the strategy standpoint in the next 5 or 10 years. After that, what we are just implementing is we are just doing the asset management program in place. And once we get to that one and identify our weak links or like the weak chain in the links, we were thinking about like bringing the predictive maintenance and preventative maintenance concept into our infrastructures. From what I said, I want to just point it out. There was like a good discussions earlier this morning that we all heard about, that AI and the machine learning and all those new technologies. But how we can use these technologies out in the market, how we can implement these to our assets, and how it can be useful from generating the data to be applicable to end users, which are our operations. Operations needs to be satisfied with their equipment, and it's not just maintaining. Innovation, modernization is a part of that. So what we are bringing with the predictive maintenance or preventative maintenance as the first approach is maintain the current status of the asset and make it better. But the predictive, we are just preventing the catastrophic failures. We want to just mitigate the risk of any failures in the system. So this is another approaches that we were working on it. The other thing is I also want to think about from the strategy standpoint and the bigger picture and the financial aspect. All of these plans are good when you have the money, right? When you don't have the money, you have to just prioritize your tasks. If you have the strategy plan, asset strategy plan, financial plan, then you can even short term for 5 years, or even you can plan it for 10 years or even 50 years. Then you can have a better picture what is forthcoming, what is the priority to address now, what's the priority based on your financial resources that can be available to you, funding, the SRF state revolving funding or the federal money or the grant money, whatever just comes. You can prioritize your tasks and you can just use that to just modernize and rehabilitate your structures.
That's great, and I'm wondering too, from enacting the asset plans, and Rebecca, maybe from your experience working on doing just that and getting some of the data, what were some of the challenges that you or either any of your field teams experience as you start to go on this documentation journey of your assets?
Well, our biggest problem is developing workflows. You have to have your workflow documented before you can really get going with your asset management. We have CityWorks. That's who do we utilizes. The problem is a lot of people, when they go through their day-to-day activities, they know what they're doing, and they don't really think about having an SOP or a protocol on what they do. And then all of a sudden, they told us, well, we got to documentate your workflow, what you do in a day, or, how do you address this problem if you get a call. And a lot of these people go, no, I don't know. And the problem is nobody really thinks about it. They come to work, they do their day-to-day stuff, and they don't really think about how important their day-to-day activities really are. And that's where our major challenge is trying to get people to documentate what they were doing, so we had an idea how to develop the workflow, so we could develop the process and determine how we could calculate the data at the end.
Yeah, and another issue too is some of these records are so old. They're hundreds of years old, and you're trying to read them and they don't make sense. The street names have changed, addresses have changed, and you're trying to put it into the new systems. So I think that that's also a big challenge that the water department has over some of the other industries with just gathering data.
Because we have employees who are, a lot of our workforce is aging, and we've got a number of employees who are going to be retiring in probably 2 to 3 years, and a lot of these guys have got 40 years plus experience, and it's almost to replicate that experience into a software program. But we're trying to at least documentate their knowledge of the system as best we can into our GIS, which is works with CityWorks, to at least try to save that information that they have collected for over those years, because you cannot, like I say, you cannot replicate 40 years of experience into a software program. It can't be done, at least today it can't. And so we're trying to do what we can to utilize that experience and for documentation, update our GIS, then work it through CityWorks. But it's going to be a challenge, but we're trying.
In that modernization effort, where do we see the industry going, and how can modernization and technology help us move away from maybe trying to figure out where things are, or just kind of maintaining the days-to-days, to thinking more about enhancing the system or being more preventative about the way we take care of our infrastructure?
Yeah, I believe that's a very good question, because we are currently having this challenge through our infrastructures and in our system, because there are some, as we are moving with the new technologies, the machine learning, the artificial intelligence technologies that's going on. We want to take the advantage of implementing these technologies into our system. We have to just dig in to see what are the current resources are and how it can be applicable to be useful for our end as well. So we are starting with the pilot program as an example to see. We are just trying for one of our pump stations to see how the feedback will gonna come out. We're trying with the short term, like the pilot for a year program. We just implementing, for instance, like the predictive maintenance. With the predictive maintenance, I heard about the very good stories that they're implementing the new sensors to attach it to, for instance, like your electrical equipment to detect, or your motor equipment to detect the vibration and all those sounds. So in case that it's just going beyond your threshold, it can be notified the operator in charge, and the operator can take all those precautions, methods to just shut down the equipment or do whatever that they need to do. So in that case, we're just mitigating any risk of failure or any additional financial burdens that this will gonna cause to that infrastructures later on. So we're trying to implement it in the near future to our system. Yep.
One of the things we've been trying to do is there's a lot of software out in the market in today's world, and I have a little background in software from college, and so I'm kind of the unofficial, the IT guy at work. But what I've found out is that not all software is created equal, and I don't want to say anything bad about the software engineers that may be in here, but you have to really be careful, especially when you're a smaller town, and utilizing software to help to make your workplace more efficient. And so, when we came to the asset management, that was a very challenging process, because we were bombarded daily with, software invitations, advertisements, whatever you want to call it, from various, and we ended up with CityWorks. I'm not saying they're the best out there, but it's been working for us. And, you know, if it works for us, you know, a town 30,000, hopefully it would work for other people. And, but with the advent of AI, who knows where that's path is going to lead to. I'm kind of interested in that because if it could make our workplace more efficient, I'm all for it. But I'm not just going to have software for the sake of having software. I want to make sure that it's going to make our workplace more efficient, and that would help us identify areas of concern, put the money toward it, and correct those areas of concern, and go from that.
I think you just highlighted the importance of understanding your technology approach and the key of configuring technology. There's an adage in my design world that I come from of when you design for everyone, you design for no one. And so, you know, these technology solutions are in many ways for everyone, and that's where configuration and building a team approach and a collaborative approach becomes so important. Would you be able to share a little bit more in our last minute and a half here?
Yeah, absolutely. That's what I want to just point it out and reiterate it multiple times, that we need the collaboration. Collaboration is the key. Just partnering the private and the public side to get leverage of the resources and expertise of the private side is the key. We can't sit on the government end and say, oh, we know everything. But no, this is not the thing. We need to just bring the resources available in the market and see what, and need to have the leverage of these like expertise to come and bring their like ideas on the table and help us to like maintain and like modernize our facility. I would just say the collaboration is the key here.
I totally agree. You got to have cooperation among your workforce. I mean, it's got to be by everybody. If it's not, then you're going to fail. You need everybody to work together.
I want to thank you. I know that 30 minutes is always a little bit quick to get into the weeds of things, but really appreciate sharing your perspectives and your experiences working in water infrastructure. I thank everybody in the audience who's been hanging out here with us for the whole day, and anybody who's tuning in on YouTube listening later. Really appreciate everyone who's been part of these conversations all in for day. So thank you.
Ken said